How I got involved in all of this was back in 2007, watching a young man on an HBO Real Sports special talking about a game he'd written called Head Games. And he was describing the symptoms and signs of neurocognitive problems from concussions and repetitive hits to the head. And every single one of them, when he started describing them, was my husband, Jeff. And we had separated about a year before. And I got a knot in my stomach. And the next thing I knew, I said, God, if I'm supposed to get involved in any of this, could that have been the demise of my marriage? Or was it because my husband was physically disabled at 30 years old and had an addiction to prescription drug medication? So I Googled this young man. Within 24 hours, I found him on the internet. And a couple days later, we set a conference call. In the morning of the call, I was watching Good Morning America on one of the stations. And I saw Mike Ditka and Joe D. that my husband had played with at Buffalo talking about the congressional hearings. And when I had the conversation with Chris that afternoon, he said, Brandi, you've got to come. You've got to talk about what goes on behind closed doors. I had just written the manuscript for a book I wrote called The Flip Side of Glory, and talking about what goes on behind closed doors when the family unit is lost in transition. And it's not just football, but any type of a professional athlete, which now we've expanded into high school, collegiate, and elite athletes. It's just as devastating for one of them when they are transitioning back into what we call the real world. Kind of a little bit different on the perspectives of our military, from the standpoint that I look at the discipline that our athletes have had to go through and the type of discipline and focus that our military has had to go through. And when you're looking at that aspect of it, the focus and the discipline is very much the same when both sides are trying to transition back into what we call the real world. At that point in time, when we started getting back together, plus all of the wonderful changes that started happening in the league made a lot of positive changes. I love football. I'm not here to tell somebody whose child is a gifted player not to let them play, because I feel that is something that if they have that gift and passion, they should. But I wanted to finalize what happened with our love story, how we ended up getting back together, and how our family became something of a catalyst that I really push for now with Pro Athletes Transition, and that is keeping the family unit together. This is all going to be put back into the book, The Unbreakable Strength. I want to show our love story. My husband was one of the most wonderful men you would ever want to meet. To see him deteriorate over the last 10 years we were together, to see him finally put his wall down in 2010 and find his spirit again, and want to start having some testing and want to know that we're not going to leave him. Men have a lot of pride. And this is something that's been very difficult for our athletes, because they've always been put up here as the bigger person. They've always had to learn how to hide their pain while taking pain, while learning about how to endure physical pain every time that they're on the field. And knowing that their job isn't on the line every day, it's on the line every play. And so there's a lot of in-depth things that go on. And one thing that I've learned about a lot of our players and athletes is that they're extremely sensitive men, almost like big men in 4-year-olds' bodies, from the perspective that the sensitivity side it can be so overwhelming when they are coming back and transitioning. And when they're on the field, that's business. That's where their discipline is. But when they're off the field, they're wonderful fathers. The NFL and a lot of the professional athletes get a very bad rap. But when you look at the percentile rate of those athletes, the majority of them are loving, caring Christian family men who gives back to the community in many, many ways. When we started understanding about the argyrophilic grain disease, I started researching it back, and it was recently discovered by another physician, I don't remember his name, in 1968. and it was more in the Alzheimer's category. And this was something that Dr. McKee and Dr. Stern had said, you know, Brandi, we want to do more research on this. I want to confer with some other neurologists because I haven't seen this in a football player before, along with the CTE, to have both. And that, from my understanding, it's more on the Alzheimer's side, and it's also something that you don't see in players, or not necessarily players, but people aging in their 80 plus years. So this was something, but the symptoms are very similar. And that was something that was an eye-opener for me, because also dementia and Alzheimer's symptoms are also very similar to chronic traumatic encephalopathy symptoms, because you have anger management, you have outbursts, you have verbal abuse, you have a roller coaster of up and down mood swings, you have memory loss. So, you know, as far as putting them in a category on that segment, yes, but when you actually do the brain slides, they're all completely different. So that is something that was an eye-opener to me. They've been involved with the Betty Ford Foundation, the Hazelton. They have for psychological now, the Care Foundation, the NFL Player Care Foundation will give up to 7 or 8 psychologist appointments for not only the player but the family, which is good. The trust came in 2013. They're still working on a lot of things. The NFL itself has started working on a lot more benefits. I am part of the NFL alumni. I'm their secretary and chapter engagement coordinator for our Tampa Bay chapter. And I do have to say the NFL and the NFL alumni are 2 separate entities. One has nothing to do with the other. We are a 501c3, and our goal is caring for kids and taking care of our own. And our NFL alumni benefit page.org, if you look on it, the benefits are overwhelming for not only for our players but for our families. The one thing that was happening, and the reason that I'm still trying to intervene more with the NFL and the Players Association, because I have certifications in those areas, is to bring more of the family support, get them more involved in the family support side of it. It's great for a family to go see a psychologist for 6 or 7 visits. Our guys, the most important thing to our guys is their children. I can tell you that right now. They may not get along with the spouse, but those children are their everything. That our son was my husband's everything.